Hello indie game fans, I have more upcoming indie games to watch in this video with a couple of Metroidvanias, JRPGs,
Farm Simulation RPG,
and more of interest here. But first, let's begin with Cursebane, a pixel art katana action roguelite which is completely my jam, where you're using an elementally enhanced sword to cut through enemies in the ever-changing Forest of Fate, where they just released a playable demo on Steam, so go check that out if interested. I still find Twitter to be a good place to discover indie games, so it has its users, with a game that caught my eye being Beacon of Neyda, a side-scrolling base defense strategy game with what I would describe as a dirty pixel art look, where everything is just so grungy looking and kind of awesome. You are going to various bases and have to repair the main tower in order for it to become a safe haven, frantically constructing buildings and defenses to fight off waves of enemies and might be cool. This video is brought to you by Forgotten Waters, a single-player farm simulation RPG, with the twist being that it is largely set underwater, where you play as a prince who has been transformed into a sea creature by sorcerers, now having to rebuild a kingdom underwater and eventually reclaim the island that was once his home. For the most part, you are doing farming game stuff like clearing the seabed, tilling the land and planting crops, being able to access ancient technology which will help in the automation of farming as you attend to other matters. Of course, there are villagers to get to know and maybe fall in love with, and does seem to have a more in-depth combat system as well, where you enter the depths and fight all sorts of creatures. From the skill tree shown off in this trailer, skills are split into 5 areas, namely mining, farming, tech, combat and breed, with the last one focused around jellyfish, where you can capture and breed these creatures with the larger goal of discovering all the jellyfish species of different colors. As mentioned, eventually you will be able to get back to the surface and can establish a farm there as well, with presumably different crops that you can grow, so it's an interesting dual home-based setup that is different from other farming games. This is currently on Kickstarter seeking funding, so check out their campaign page for stretch goals and rewards, and definitely pledge your support if you want to see this get made. The developer of DeadWire described it as Hotline Miami meets Watch Dogs, so of course I'm curious, primarily for the first half of that description, since the legacy of that game from 2012 continues to be seen and felt in today's indie gaming landscape. It's a top-down shooter in which you play as a hacker and have to take on gangs to get money to repay the debts of an orphanage that saved you, combining the fast-paced shooter action with something a little bit more tactical. You can hack and link items together, for example, 2 enemies, where shooting one of those will kill both, but can also do so with environmental objects like switches, cars and more. The concern here would be the slowing down of the action, which is contrary to Hotline Miami, but the developers are forging their own path and could be interesting. Another title that looks kind of awesome is YOYO Punk, a self-described physics platform fighter, so you can imagine how a yo-yo moves, which got my attention since a clip they showed off made it look like Sonic, but it is a competitive multiplayer game which lessens my interest in the game, but still, a cool look and might be fun with friends. At a glance, Before I Go doesn't look the most impressive, perhaps having as much of a blank slate type character as you can get from the completely white featureless character model, but this is a Metroidvania, so I'm at least curious about this. Your primary combat option appears to be a ranged attack, but from the screenshots and UI, seems to have some Hollow Knight influence as well, and then you realize that this game is set in Limbo, which explains the otherworldly, almost grime kind of aesthetic to the game and might be good. 15 years in the making is Granser, coming to us from solo developer Steve Gell from Pugware, best known for the Sculpt-Fold series of games, with this being a JRPG of epic proportions. Our hero and his dubious allies are unraveling a web of mystery surrounding something known as the Core, but in the background, a greater threat reawakens which I'm assuming they will have to deal with at some point. This has a very interesting art style as well as a combat system with something known as focus management, which is supposed to be unique, so if you're a fan of the genre like me, this is one to watch. I mentioned that I have a couple of Metroidvanias in this video, and Xplorite is another one of these, which I believe is Hollow Knight inspired due to the slashing animation and the downward attack. But it's sci-fi and has a cool look. You're exploring a mysterious planet in search of the missing research team, so very conventional sci-fi stuff, where I'm guessing that things went horribly wrong. Interestingly, you are battling more robotic enemies rather than aliens or mutants, and might be a hidden gem to watch. Puzzle Bobble Battle Royale is the elevator pitch for Bubbits and looks awesome. That is all. Of course, the first thing that drew my eye to Seed of Nostalgia are the pixel art visuals, and then I realized that this is a turn-based JRPG, so extra points from me since I grew up with the Chrono Triggers and Final Fantasies of the world. Yes, the retro throwback JRPG is overdone at this point, but for me at least, there's still a warm feeling of nostalgia since it has that classic hero's journey, save the world kind of story setup as well, which could be neat. You play as a young spirit blade in training, sworn to protect the world tree and the mystical Gaia seed within, but on the eve of his graduation, a mysterious event disrupts the rites and sends the village into a state of despair. You must then gather a list of unlikely heroes stumbling upon a greater conspiracy as you attempt to save your dying world. So that's like 10 for 10 on all the classic JRPG tropes. Still, it has pretty pixel art both in exploration mode as well as the ultra minimalist look of the world map, with some modern sensibilities like Sea of Stars or Crosscode in the exploration portion, as well as gathering materials for crafting. And I'm gonna put $5 that there will be an airship in this game as well, so for all the good retro vibes, keep an eye on this. Another RPG title that was recommended to me is the 12th slot Saloon, one that has an awesome pixel art look as well, but more importantly, is a turn-based RPG but with real-time bullet hell elements, so an Undertale-like, if you can call it that, having the option to do actions in combat to eventually pacify your enemy, or to use the attack option for a more traditional experience. You play as a cat and are exploring a place known as the Land Without Happy Endings, having to figure out their place in the world, and might end up being one of those cult classics, with there being a demo available on Steam as well, so do give it a try. Publisher Rogue Duck Interactive seemingly came out of nowhere and have suddenly signed quite a number of strategy games under their banner, another of which is Kingdom's Deck, a card-based city builder with a voxel art style which looks pretty awesome. You are drawing and placing down cards to construct buildings and defenses as you improve your economy, but are under constant threat of attack and have to deal with enemies as well, with offensive ability cards that might change the tide of battle. It doesn't explicitly say that it's a roguelite, but there is the whole survival part if your kingdom gets destroyed, which means replayability, so we'll have to see what final form this game takes in 2025. We also have the announcement of the next game in the My Time series of live sim titles, following My Time at Portia and My Time at Sandrock, which is appropriately named My Time at Evershine, where you are the governor of a brand new city on the fringes of the Free Cities. As compared to the earlier games, the characters in this have more realistic proportions, rather than being chibi characters, with the whole frontier settlement thing being interesting since there is an antagonistic force known as the Duvos Empire that you and your alliance buddies are fighting against, so there's more to this than meets the eye. This was also confirmed for quote-unquote future Nintendo platforms yet to be announced, and might be the first official confirmation for a Switch 2 game. It has been a great year for survival horror game fans between the release of Crow Country and Hollow Body, and looks to get even better with Sorry We Are Closed, which received a release date for November. It got my attention due to the polygonal aesthetic as well as the mixing of fixed, overhead and first-person camera angles to give it quite the unique feel. You are attempting to break a curse placed on you by a powerful demon, counting down the days to your own demise and loss of freedom, but you might be able to break the curse. There are other residents that you can help or hinder due to your actions, with the variety of demonic weapons that you can wield in first-person combat looking pretty neat. Another central mechanic is that of your third eye, which you can open to peer into another world, uncovering secrets and can even be used to solve puzzles. Additionally, this has multiple endings as well, so based on what I've heard about this, looks very promising and might be on the level of something like Signalis. Here's a game that just looks well made, where the action-adventure farming sim title Luma Island has you and your friends exploring said island, building out your dream farm and settlement, but can also venture into the wilderness to explore and fight. As such, it follows in the footsteps of games like Lens Island or even Core Keeper to some extent, and while I don't think it's doing anything drastically new or innovative, it has quickly shot up my own personal wishlist since this game looks awesome. From the description, it appears to be more of a sandbox title without a main story or plot, so let's see how that goes, and interestingly, will not be an early access release, so I wonder how much content there will be, and if you are curious, put a mark on your calendar to check out its demo during the upcoming Steam Mix Festival in October. A perhaps not so new announcement, but one that I have yet to cover, is that of Mio Memories in Orbit, an absolutely stunning cel-shaded Metroidvania where you play as a little android exploring a technological arc known as The Vessel, in which machines have gone rogue and you need to fight your way through. The first thing that came to mind when I saw this game was Sable, but of course as a Metroidvania, which I prefer, having all the elements of the genre like traversal ability unlocks, backtracking, combat, upgrades and more, so I'll be looking forward to this in 2025. Watch this video for more of the best games of the year.